This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome very much in this knowledge session of Empower Your Projects. I'll appreciate it very much that you make time available to participate. The goal for this session is to share knowledge, information about how project organizations work, how projects work, background information. The situation where we are in, projects do run into problems a lot. Most of the time, projects do fail, and there are many strategies available. But it looks like if we just check the success rate of projects, it is not really working. And we become much more efficient, but I think that's also part of the personal efficiency that goes up. And this is the topic that I'm actually interested in strategies, in methodologies that work better, in solutions that work better, that are easy to learn and easier to use. And that is the topic of today. And I like every month to pick a topic, and that is most of the time related to critical chain project management. And just to check, who of you is familiar with critical chain project management, have heard about it, know a little bit about it? May I see hands from you? Okay, good, excellent. I like to fall back on critical chain because I consider it as one of the best, or maybe even the best project management strategy available. And I think that is a good it is a good starting point for learning about project organizations. And I like also to be a bit provocative. It makes it just more fun. And there is a reason also for it. And I'm going to share my screen. I think, where is my screen? Wait a minute. I have too many screens open. But this is the screen I would like to show. There we go. Okay. Now, one of the topics I like to discuss is the topic about what can we do with the project organization, but why critical chain failed. And there is a reason to put it in this way. There are so many success stories for critical chain project management. If you just implement it correctly, then success is guaranteed. But just have a look at this graph. This is a graph from Google Search. You can get this information, the Google Trends analysis, and it shows how frequently the term CCPM is searched. And we see there is a peak somewhere in the early part, so around 2007, but there is a decline of people interested. Looks like, and it looks like the message. There's a decline in people, a fall in searches. And it is just going on. And I'm just curious, why is that? And organizations that seem to work with critical chain for a long time, that implement critical chain, are exceptionally rare. And critical chain is similarly in the same period introduced as agile. That is, in this case, the orange line. The critical chain, hardly any people seem to be interested compared to project management and compared to agile. While critical chain has the idea to be a better alternative than traditional project management. Well, at least on this part, it is not successful. Critical chain didn't do very successful, and I'm sorry when I'm too bold in what I say. It's not the reason, but I'd also like to be a bit critical on that, and I feel that also as a call of action from Ellie Goldratt. These are a couple of notes from Henry Camp. It's almost 10 years ago that Dr. Goldratt passed away. And in the last week, he gathered people around him, experts in the theory of constraints. And one of the things he mentioned is a message that the knowledge exists right now to make the world a better place. And Sir Isaac Newton famously wrote, if I have seen a little further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And Ellie Goldratt gives the message, the encouragement or the call to action to climb on his shoulders to improve the world. Well, actually, that is what we're doing today. It's not my goal to climb on anyone's shoulders. But it is also a bit the fate of people who live today. We stand on the shoulders of our parents and of many other people. And it just happened. It was never my plan to, well, improve anything of critical chain or to criticize anything, but it just happened, and it came on my path. So I feel free to criticize, and but also there is a lot of value in critical chain. I learned a lot of it, and I think this is a very good place to start. Okay. If there are maybe people, someone who wants to make a remark at this moment or comment, say something, have a question already, then we can listen to that, of course. So feel free, raise your hand, or otherwise I just go ahead. The observation that I do, so with so many success stories happening, and so many success stories published, there is a lot of enablers to create those success stories. There is no doubt about it. If you implement critical chain in the right way, then you get this success. It also often fails, and often that is also because we just don't follow. I didn't follow exactly the procedures that are necessary for a good implementation. But nonetheless, what I like to discuss is of the point that is clear that if you follow the instructions and the guidelines, then probably the chances are great that you have very good success. There are massive proof. There are hundreds of success stories, cases, and the improvements are remarkable. But when we look at the previous slides, and I did implementations of critical chain and it failed, and there is something that is put more weight in the balance, and that is disabling that success. So you can make success, but there are also things that might disable that success. And I want to figure out what is disabling that success, because maybe that is one of the factors that troubled critical chain at the moment. Okay, good. So what are the disablers? That is what I want to do, to analyze. The workout of this presentation starts with some, let's say, observations and summary, and that will be the part till 9 o'clock on my clock, and then we go into more in the how project organizations work. We take a more deep dive. I approach critical chain in this way. It's like critical chain is like an hypothesis. It's an explanation about how project organizations work. And the idea is that if you do an implementation, I consider that as an experiment. If it is successful, then we confirm the hypothesis of critical chain, how organizations work. If it fails, then it falsifies that assumption. And from a, let's say, scientific, I'm not a scientist, but if this would be a scientific experiment, the experiment is also a success, but because it tells something about the organization, and it might work differently, or the strategy might work differently than we anticipated. And I'm very much interested in how do project organizations work, because how can we understand how can we make solutions for our clients, for the companies that we work for, if we don't understand how the organizations work. And the difficulty is, of course, that we cannot put an organization on our table, take it apart and analyze all the components. That makes it very difficult. Actually, project organization, I don't know exactly what it is. We cannot see it. and lots of the work is imaginary. So that makes it more difficult to understand what project organizations are. And that is what I want to figure out today. Here we go. A little bit about myself. I'm Jan van Egmond. I'm involved in projects since the early 90s in different roles. Engineering, I'm an engineer from origin. I've done project management. I got the opportunity to look behind the scenes in many different project organizations, in many different industries. I had the opportunity to speak with lots of people and business owners about how they do projects and how they run their business and how they improve and what are the challenges that they see. I call myself project management hacker, well, because there are better ways that are easy to learn and easier to use. And in 2012, I became an independent researcher, and I was interested in why can't we prevent that projects are running into problems? Because that was my observations everywhere with every project manager I was discussing. Every project manager struggles with projects. Every organization where I came is struggling with projects. Projects and problems, they are two hands on the belly, and it's almost a synonym for each. Why can't we prevent that? There are so many solutions, and for some reason, we cannot prevent it. And I'm very much interested in why that was. So that's 10 years ago. I started with it, and this is spent a lot of my time, almost all my time, on this research. Okay. Well, one of the first things I started with in my analysis is doing a root cause analysis. You might see this, recognize this kind of flow. It is in the current reality tree. It works simple. Gather all kinds of problems that were familiar to me, that I heard others talk about, that I read from literature. I put them on post-it papers. And the idea is that every problem causes new problems. And every problem is caused by some other problem. And if you have a pile of problems, you can pick up one of those cards and figure out which of the other cards is the root cause, is the cause of this, and what is the impact of this, and put it on a brown paper in this case, and connect everything. And well, the interesting part is this seems to come in this way. You can trace back problems to a common root cause, and in this case, my conclusion was that 94% of all the problems I analyzed, it depends a little bit on my set of data that I have, but it was a few hundred problems. They were all could be traced back to someone who didn't have enough time. There are too many other things to do. I'm not saying that this is the root cause for all problems, certainly not the case. Projects are for big and complex works that we have never done before. This is really the most complex stuff that we can do. Of course, that runs in problems. So that is something we cannot avoid. But also, many problems can be traced back to people who don't have enough time. And people who don't have time, you find them in every organization. And what I also noticed, is that solving that is not on the agenda of project organizations. I talk with business owners about what do you do to improve your organizations, and never that is make sure that my people have time to get their work done. It's never on the agenda. Well, this was the observation 10 years ago, and I thought, well, this is great, that this is my mission, put this on the agenda of organizations, not knowing how difficult that is. And I'm glad I didn't know that upfront, otherwise I would have skipped and we wouldn't have this session tonight. Okay, so this was my analysis. I learned before about theory of constraints. I learned a little bit about critical chain project management. And when I did my research and I figured out this, I felt I had to join our local community for theory of constraints, because my feeling was that people who the theory of constraint background, critical chain background, have a much better understanding how project organizations work. So the in-depth understanding of project organizations than the people of my local chapter for project management. So that is how I joined, and I want to understand how it works. I want to learn how to talk about it, what is important, and I learned a lot there as well. Okay, good. That is a little bit my background. There's a part, I got involved in implementing critical chain. I tell a little bit about that as well. Okay. Well, I make a bold statement why critical chain failed. Let me first define what critical chain is. I spoke with a lot of people, and well, everybody seems to have their own definition of what critical chain is. So let me define that, what I refer as critical chain. I know there are many more developments in the field of critical chain, in theory of constraints, in project management, and well, maybe there are some developments that are parallel with Empower Your Projects, what I do, but let me also describe what critical chain is, and then at least we have that foundation. It is not a real training, of course, but it is very short, a kind of a summary what it is. Okay, first of all, a critical chain is designed to fix a very specific problem. Executing too many problems, executing too many projects simultaneously causes bad multitasking. That is the problem that I read in the system and tactics tree. System and tactics tree, the strategy and tactics tree is the blueprint. It is a booklet with all the assumptions about critical chain. I like it very much, and the information that I put over here is coming from this booklet, all the assumptions. And this is what Eric Goldratt and the co-creators of critical chain wrote, is that the problem to solve is, well, actually executing too many projects simultaneously causes bad multitasking. It's that combination. And the solution is that companies must properly control the number of projects that are open at any given moment in time. So, okay, that is fine. So this is the strategy, and looking at all those amazing success stories, my assumption is, my guess is, and also analyzing those success stories, is this is what they do. So they fix this problem. And if you just do this, you get those success stories. That is basically the story and the interpretation that I make. Now, critical chain project management comes with quite an extensive toolbox, and I mention the tools that are what I consider unique for critical chain. There are more tools in the critical chain toolbox, but they come straight from the project management toolbox, so I leave them out. But there are a couple of things what I consider that was what I consider critical chain. Well, traditionally, what I learned at university is that the critical path is the chain of tasks that run from the start to the end of the project, that has no space in between them, no slack or whatsoever in between them, and defines the length of the project. So this is the longest chain in the project. Well, what I also learned from my professors is that this methodology doesn't take into account resources. So if there are just a few resources, or when there are scarce resources, it just doesn't take it in account. And that is what in this case is the case. So that those purple resources, that is not taken into account, and this schedule is not executable. And that is what critical chain is adding. It makes it a resource loaded schedule. And this critical chain is the name giver of critical chain project management. Okay, okay, good. This is just a scheduling technique. Another important tool of critical chain is buffer management, taking all the reserves from tasks that are hidden in all that project, taking it apart and putting that at the end of the project. And then you have a kind of a shared buffer for all tasks, and that is a better way to deal with uncertainty. And it is so much better that you even can reduce the buffer and can reduce the duration of project. So you have buffer management, and you have then also the task time reduction, so shorter task times, and that can save a lot of time. Well, this is just a free let's say, reduction of the project duration, you don't have to do anything for that. You can, it's just a schedule, and you do this trick and move around with the buffer, and then suddenly your task is short. That is the idea. Well, you can use the buffer for also monitoring progress. Then we come to the fever chart. We can check the health, and the fever chart shows the amount of buffer consumption relative to how much progress there is in the project. And if you make a lot of progress and you make a little consumption of the project, of the buffer, then well, you don't consume the buffer, you don't need the reserves, and then you will stay in the green. And if you consume too much buffer, then you will go in the red. And it's a handy graph and a powerful graph to see what the health is of your project. You can do this for multiple projects as well. So these are a couple of tools for critical chain. You can apply them to a single project. Also, typically is the fever chart is how do you call it? The full kit. It is the quality criteria for starting a project, but to me that is just straightforward project management. I didn't put in the list, but I'm not so critical about it. I'm fine with that if you consider that as a critical chain tool. Okay. Now moving to multi-project situation is the situation, well, it's actually the staggering part. And what is important over here, I go back to the slide I just showed. Which one? This one. The solution, the strategy is that companies must control the number of projects that are open at any given moment in time. And that is exactly what staggering is about. Yeah, it works like this. In this case, the counting of the project is done in the part where is this black resource, this particular resource or this stage in the project. In this case, the number of projects is 3, but you can also say, well, we limit the number of projects to 2, or we limit the number of projects in that particular stage to 1. And this is the strategy that makes the success of critical chain. And this is what, in the very short summary of critical chain project management, is doing all the work. This is what, so I recognize this in the strategy, and I recognize that this is exactly the strategy of theory of constraints. So that matches, and we see the success stories. So my assumption is this works. This is also very much in line with my own research, because if you do the staggering, then you prevent that people have too much work to do, that people don't have time to get all the work done. So this perfectly matches up. What I also conclude is that this is sufficient to create those success stories. You don't need to do anything else when you just look at these strategy. I have no indication from other resources that you really need to do all the other stuff, although it makes it's very plausible that it will have some benefit for project managers in certain cases, but in general, for making a project improvement, it is sufficient to do this kind of lineup, this staggering. This is my conclusion. This is what is doing all the work. Okay. Now, continue with what is critical chain project management. Part of critical chain project management is how you implement it, how you set up. And I consider the strategy and tactics tree as also a very important part of critical chain project management. It is the implementation of how to do it. Well, I consider that the TOCICO as the institute that owns the knowledge or the standard of critical chain project management. There is not such an organization that is owning this, but this is how I look at it. This strategy and tactics tree is published on their website. It is available for everybody. So this is a nice reference. for it. I know others have another strategy and tactics tree. I know people have some adjustments to this, but this is what I'm referring to. This is the definition of what I talk to. So if I say critical chain, why critical chain failed, then I'm talking about this. Now, what I particularly look at is the 3.1 part. The rest I ignore, just because this is just the focus that I'm looking at, and it is the hardcore project management part what I'm particularly interested in. And if I take this part apart and I put all the measures for building a meeting promises, how to organize your project, then this is about all the measures that are involved. And this is the minimal viable implementation. If you do less, then it will not sustain. Good. Well, you see the freeze, you see eliminating multitasking, defrost toolkits, etc., etc., etc. You see the staggering part and some things that must be done in the organization, and finally the virtual drum adjustments. And you have to go through all this to sustain critical chain. If you quit earlier, if you don't do the last part, then it will evaporate for guarantee. And that is this is the minimum viable implementation. You cannot do with less. There is you recognize there is a part for single projects, there is a part for multi-projects, and this is the implementation strategy. So when I talk about critical chain, I refer to this part. That is just my choice. That is how I. That is my demarcation or my boundary where I put the. Okay. Now, what I also very much that is really what I really appreciate very much. That is all those assumptions. All those assumptions. I can read it. I can follow the thought of the creators of Ellie Goldratt and other people who have contributed to this, and I can follow every step in their thinking, and that is so great to have such a detailed strategy with the assumption and why are the choices made and why certain measures and why not in a different way, and it's very good. So this is a picture of this is this gives me a lot of background in understanding not only about critical chain project management, but also what the creators of critical chain thought about the organization that is about the organization, how project organizations work. Now, big promise of critical chain is that there is unbeatable success. The viable vision is these tactics to achieve a net profit equal to the current total sales. Well, if you want to do that, that means if you make now 10 million revenue, then the idea is in 4 years, you can convert that to 10 million profit. And this is an amazing improvement. And considering, looking at all those improvements, success stories, this is amazing. How much progress you can make, how much improvements you can make, and that it just goes on and on and on and on for a period of 4 years. This is a big promise. Now, the second promise is it is exceedingly simple. After all, it is critical chain, it is theory of constraints. So this is also a promise of critical chain. It is exceedingly simple. Yeah. Okay. And all this together, I just do the check with my own research. This all is fixing. I see the connection. I see the logic. This all is fixing that people have too many things to do. So fixing too many things to do. That problem will be solved if I implement critical chain. So I have analyzed those problems in project organizations, and this is the problem that I discovered. Others have done it also, but what I learned, this is what is the problem that must be solved, and critical chain is just solving that. So that is great to see that there is a connection. And when you fix this, then you get those amazing success stories. And there's so many, and it is impacting every KPI, every area, every factor of projects, whether it is throughput time, increased reliability, everything. It becomes better and better. Okay. Okay, good. Now, I have also experienced implementing critical change. And so when I was doing my research, I was engaging with the local theory of constraints group. A couple of experts asked me to join them and to help them implement critical change for their clients. And well, this is of course a great opportunity. I learned a lot about critical change. I read the books. I followed the satellite program. I watched many videos from Ellie Goldratt and from others. I read the books. I read there's a do-it-yourself handbook, and I was well prepared. I mastered planning software. I worked with experts who had done it many times before with a great track record. So this couldn't go wrong, but it did go wrong. The implementations failed, and well, disappointing, of course, but good. It just happened. And in the aftermath of the implementation, I wanted to figure out what is actually going on. So I knew there is a lot of, there are critical change has those enablers to create those success stories, but now I hit myself the disablers of that success. It just failed. And these are the disablers that I encountered. It failed. That is a reason what is undermining success of critical change. Of course, if you fail, then no matter how good the strategy is, if it fails for whatever reason, then it is not, well, it's not helping you, of course. And probably, and of course, I didn't follow the guidelines and the steps properly. But good, never mind, it did fail. I found it difficult. I found it difficult to explain. I noticed that people found it difficult to understand. It was often an uphill battle with lots of, well, fierce discussions with people to convince them, to persuade them to do whatever is needed and to buy in. It was a burden. We had to go through all those plans over and over again. And there was a lot of administrative work people were not used to do, and they, well, and also people fell back into old problems already during that implementation. Took long, and they fell back into old problems. And I hear from others, I spoke with others as well, clients and organizations who try to implement it, people who pass by in my training and workshops, other consultants who say, well, actually, it fails often, and it also seems to evaporate very quickly. And these are disablers for success. So if you have a strategy, it not only must be capable of delivering success, you not only, so yeah, but it must also not fail during implementation, and the problem should not come back, of course. If that is the case, then that is not good for a strategy, then people will lose interest. That is what we saw in those first graphs. So these are disablers of success. I experienced, I heard from others, and so I take that as well. Okay, this is my observation. I don't know. I have not done an extensive research, scientific, statistical significant research on that, but this is my impression, and it adds up to, well, organizations that really do implement critical change for an extended time are exceptionally rare. So to me, it matches up. Good. After the last implementation, the failure of that implementation, the client said, okay, we're going to quit the contract. I called the supplier of the software and discussed all the problems that we went through. I called them almost daily to figure out how we could do it. And finally they said, well, we have a problem, and all software suppliers have the same problem. This is what we cannot do. And yeah, that you have to accept that. Good. Well, then that weekend, this was a conversation I remember on Thursday. That weekend, my family and I, well, we with my family, my sons, their girlfriend, went out for a family weekend holiday. We do that more often, just to engage with each other. We play some board games, we walk, we eat, just being together. On this particular case, I was not really in the mood, and there I'm at the back. And I was thinking about how is it possible that those implementations fail? I've worked so hard for it. I was so well prepared. Experts were there. Why was it happening? And I was looking for some new insight. And I fell back just on this famous quote of Ellie Goldratt. No matter how complex it initially looks, every situation is exceedingly simple. I looked at critical chain, I looked at the implementation, and I thought I have to take a different perspective of what I usually do, what I always have done, turn the problem in a way that it becomes exceedingly simple. And I was lucky that day, and I found something. Okay. The critical chain, this was the problem that I struggled with. A critical chain project management is dominated, the thinking is dominated in workload thinking. And it is very beautiful. You can calculate the workload very easily. And it is very powerful to detect whether there is overload, whether there are scheduling conflicts. And it's very easy to use. You see those nice, beautiful graphs. It's very powerful to see whether resources will have time, yes or no. And this is also the paradigm that critical chain is written in. Look, so the company must control the number of projects that are open at any given point in time. And this is a resource, this is a workload articulation of the problem. So, but I tried this for a project portfolio of 60 projects, and it just didn't work. I tried everything, but it just didn't work. And I realized that workload doesn't exist in reality. It is a conceptual thing for the software, but it doesn't work. And in fact, you cannot control the workload. And I have to explain it. It took me a while to accept that for myself. But imagine you want to fix the workload at 100%, and you give someone a task of 60%. Then how are you going to get the workload to 100%? That's not possible with one task that just creates 60%. And when you then give another task on top of that of 70%, then how are you going to fix that workload to 100%? That is not possible. And that is the problem what I realized. You cannot fix that workload at a fixed thing. And that is what I try to do. And you can also not fix boundaries, then shoot the workload between 90 and 110%, or 50 and 150%. You can also not define those boundaries. And if you would, it is crazy complex. It immediately becomes very complex, and you need to do a very thorough thinking and have great intuition in order to set those boundaries. It just doesn't work. And of course, you can do some approximation, and when you have all those graphs, you can do the interpretation. But if you have a big project portfolio, then it is just too big to also do it manually, and it should be possible to automate. And that is very difficult to do. And I'm not sure whether it is possible, yes or no. I think not, but I'm also happy to accept that with artificial intelligence, you can do amazing things as well. And I know that some suppliers, some software applications use artificial intelligence and machine learning to determine what are the best project scheduling options. In my case, it doesn't work, and this is what I realized. Okay. Well, the paradigm shift that I made that Saturday afternoon is that it is not about workload. In the end, it is about continuous uninterrupted flow, in particular for a specific bottleneck resource. And a continuous uninterrupted flow means that just before that resource needs another task, that task must arrive at their desk. And that is a continuous uninterrupted flow. Just in time, the work must be there. And that means that we have to start a project ahead of time so that there is preparation time so the task can migrate to that. Well, the big thing about this is workload you cannot control, but this is very easy to control. You can calculate, you can determine when exactly to start that particular project, so the work will be available just in time for a bottleneck resource. And this is very robust, very solid. It works when you, under the typical circumstances of project organizations, like poor quality project schedules, low updates, discipline, low administrative discipline of employees, high levels of uncertainty, if project schedules are not available at all, when you don't know who is involved, when capacity is changing, when productivity is changing, when clients change their mind, when executives overrule priorities, when managers bypass the system, when resources are shared. Under all these circumstances, you still can predict, you can determine when exactly to release a project into the pipeline. And in the end, when you think about it, this is the only thing that matters. This is the only thing that we can control as a portfolio manager or a business owner or a manager of project managers. The only thing that we can control and the only thing that we can decide, are we going to start this project today, yes or no? And if it is yes, we go, and we can just start people and encourage people to start working on it. If it is no, we can stop that happening. But this is the only thing that can we have under control. And what then happens, it is just send and pray. We have no control over it. We can shift a little bit with priorities, but that the only thing we can do is replenish pipelines. And we can do it right, we can do it wrong, and we can calculate what is the best way to do that. And this is a breakthrough that in the thinking. It is about replenishing just in time, continuous uninterrupted flow versus the static workload. Okay, this is about an algorithm. Algorithm is available in a project pipeline app. It is in there. It is just doing everything. It is a prototype. Prototype means all this pipelining functionalities in there. But I cannot handle 1,000 clients. And so that particular part of the growth of my business model, I need a different development for that. But for managing a project pipeline, for multiple project pipelines that share resources, that's all covered in this app. For now, I'm not going to go into the source code of that. That is not really very important. The answer of why critical chain fails is also not in the source code of this. That is in the understanding how the rest of the world looks like and how project organizations work. So I like to go into that. But it's good to acknowledge the following, that a continuous uninterrupted flow for the bottleneck corresponds with the highest theoretical throughput of the pipeline. So if you don't have a continuous uninterrupted flow, you don't have your theoretical maximum throughput. If there is gaps in the workflows, there's discontinuity, it is too low. But also if you push in more, you get multitasking. This is also not good. Well, the second part is that the continuous uninterrupted workflow also corresponds with 100% workload. So by releasing projects just in time, you do create 100% workload. Kind of. It will fluctuate quite a bit. But on average, it will be 100%. And if you have a continuous uninterrupted workflow and you postpone the start of one project, then the workload drops. And that means that you are wasting capacity. If you're starting more projects, the workload increases, projects start to jam, pile up and jam and get stuck, and then also the continuity is gone. And creating this continuous uninterrupted workflow is actually implementing the strategy of critical chain. It controls the number of projects that are open at any given moment in time in a particular way. It works also for when you have small and big projects together. Yeah? So I have implemented this not a whole lot of times. This is the second implementation. And by only doing this, so this replenishment stuff, without doing anything else, I get the same kind of results as typically you can expect from critical chain. So that was the idea. So if we control that workload, that is what is delivering the result of critical chain. And I just do only that. That gives the same result. So that is consistent with each other. Well, good to mention is that this particular implementation took 8 days. I compare it with critical chain, normally takes a year, but this implementation took just 8 days from the very first moment I spoke with the business owner. 8 days on the calendar. Okay. Now, when I compare critical with critical chain, just to get the picture, and then in a couple of minutes we take a break. By the way, critical chain is doing all all those measures together, and for this particular implementation, it is only setting up a project pipeline, and then you're basically up and running. In the particular case that I just showed, the graph was for a company that developed software for hospitals around the world. We set it up, and we started the daily routine. At the moment, it was set up after 8 days, and the daily routine, what we used as a training on the job. So we spent half an hour every day to identify which projects were off track, which projects needed to attention, which projects were supposed to get started, and we did that for 2 weeks, and then the training was complete and they could run on themselves. Okay, good. Well, there's a lot of information. The next part of the presentation is how do project organizations work. Now we take a deep dive, and this is actually, we just described the strategy and the best practice in 2 ways. First, critical chain on one side, and what I did with Empower Your Projects on the other, and some background information on it. But now is the question, how does that work in project organizations? How do project organizations work? Which is actually the thing that is needed to understand why does it work the way it works. And I also like to take the opportunity. It's a jam-packed program. I speak quickly, but yeah, to be in time for later on. But are there questions at the moment that you would like to share? And I'd like to hear that from you. I stop the share for a moment. Can see everyone. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Gideon. Great you joined. Louis, Jan-Ray, Ellen. Thank you very much for joining. What I would like to do till 9 o'clock, we take a short break for grabbing a cup of coffee, cup of tea. Then think about questions. I would be a bit disappointed if you don't have any questions. Obviously, I suppose it's not that clear. And then we go into how do project organizations work, because I want to understand, yeah, try to reverse engineer both what I did and what critical chain is doing. We can compare it. Where is the difference? What is the strengths? What are the weaknesses of it? And then understand, okay, why does it fail? And what should a successor of critical chain look like? What do we have to do to preserve the success of critical chain for next generations of project managers and business leaders? Yeah. That is everything is possible. I see a message that this is similar, and that is probably the case. Okay, let's have a break. See you in 5, 6, 7 minutes again, and see you later. Bye bye. Again. So this is the part after the break. During the first part of the session, I noticed some people were joining. I do a very quick recap of the first part. What we're talking about is the question why critical chain failed, and why I think critical chain failed is I failed implementing critical chain. So that is for me personally a thing. Oh, what is this? So what? I use public information from Google, from the Google Trends, and you see that interest in the search interest of people looking for information about critical chain had an was growing in the beginning of 2004, just after the introduction of critical chain. But then around 2007, there was a change, and the interest seems to be declining. And when we compare it to other strategies, like traditional project management, a search result of agile, then it is almost, you can ignore the interest for critical chain. It's very low. And I think that is, if a critical chain is supposed to be a strategy to replace project management or to be the next generation project management, it failed in that attempt. So this is what we talk about, and it is clear that there is enablers for critical chain, for unbeatable success. There is massive proof. There is no doubt about it. If you follow those structures and it will be successful, you get great success. But somehow there is disablers active, and I want to know what that is. I take the perspective or the thought experiment where I look for critical chain as a hypothesis about how project organizations work. There's descriptions and assumptions about how it works, and the implementations are experiments to validate those hypotheses. And if the implementation is successful, that confirms these assumptions, and if those implementations fail, then that falsifies those assumptions. Well, and we have over the past 25 years so much data from all those implementations, and not just from critical chain, but also from traditional project management and from other methodologies and lean or whatever, that all adds up to a lot of information. And based on that, we have to figure out, but how does it then work? How do project organizations work? And that is what we go through. I implemented critical chain that failed. I was lucky. I found another way to seemingly do the same, get the same kind of results, but just with an implementation of 8 days. And this seems to be a breakthrough. The moment that I implemented it, I knew, I had the intuition, this is right, but I had no clue how it worked. I had no understanding why it worked, why it was so different from critical chain, why critical chain it has a different approach, why critical, all those questions I didn't know. And that is just continuing to look and ask for the past years is what I did over the past years. And I think I didn't share my screen while I was referring to my screen. So that is not very practical of me. So I was referring to the search from Google Trends. This is the search for critical chain project management. You see there is a bump in the beginning, and then there is quite a decline, and it is just going down and down and down. And I don't see that change. And then for looking for other strategies, this is the Regis for traditional project management. We see agile. There is a strange spike over here. I don't know what it is, but compared with the search interests people are looking for critical chain, it's almost nothing. And it confirms with, I ask people also, executives and people working in projects, do you know about critical chain? I seldom get confirmation about it. Okay, good. And this is just my observations. I'm not a scientist. I'm just passionate about learning how this all works and build that understanding. And I'm just sharing my insights. And if you like it, that is great. Good. We go to the second part of the presentation, and now I'm interested in how do project organizations work. So start with a new hypothesis about project organizations. And the Empower Project comes with this new hypothesis. I'm looking now back. This is all my thinking and analysis over the past 10 years. This is what it comes down to. Then And it is just a reflection of, well, better understanding. At least that is what I think. Maybe you have a different opinion about it. It's all fine. Okay, so I use systems theory, systems to model projects, This is, I stopped typing for some reason. And this is the idea. In the middle, you see a system, and each system has a purpose, or actually each purpose has a system. You need, systems are the enablers of purpose. Then systems can be part of bigger systems, of super systems. And systems can consist of subsystems. And each of those systems, they have a purpose. And that is the simple picture and that I'm going to work for. Okay, a system that is fulfilling its purpose, well, you cannot improve it. A system that is not fulfilling its purpose, you have to improve it, because then your system is broken. So if we look for an improvement strategy, then we have to look for, okay, we must know what is the system that is broken, and then fix it somehow. That is probably has that something to do with the constraint. Here we go. So for project organizations, the following. You have companies, big organizations, government institutes, and what they tend to do, if they do a lot of projects, they bring together their projects together in a department, in a business unit, formal, informal, for the purpose of efficiency. All the project managers and engineers and people who work on those projects, they bring it all together. It's just more efficient. And that is in general, of course, the case. Organizations, collaborations, cooperations, and they exist because it is just more efficient. Together we can accomplish more. That is the idea. And we can do it more efficient together. We can share resources, and that is the mechanism that is making projects and project organizations efficient. So for projects, the goal for project is just to get them completed successfully. But projects are the big and complex works we've never done before. It's the biggest, most complex stuff that we can do. Yeah, and the goal, the purpose of project is just to get the work done, completed successfully. So keep it simple. If I have just one purpose to define, then this would be it. Okay. I don't say anything about organizations, what the purpose is of organizations. I don't know. It is just outside my scope. It can be different for different organizations, but organizations that do projects as core business, one project after another, multiple projects in parallel, they typically bring projects together, if they do it, in an organization for the purpose of efficiency. It's just more handy, more efficient to do that. Okay. Practice is that projects do run into problems, projects do fail, and that means that project organizations are not fulfilling their purpose. It's not efficient, of course, to do it that way. And I'm not saying that organizations don't add efficiency at all. But of course, they do efficient, but when projects are running into problems, when there are failures, well, that is not efficient, to say so. Well, back to my research. The problems occur because there are too many people don't have the time. They have too many other things to do. And Eddie Goldratt says the problem is executing too many projects simultaneously. That is a problem. So that is consistent. If we have too many projects for projects, if project organizations initiate too many projects, that is not efficient. That is basically the conclusion from these few slides. Okay, good. So project organizations are not efficient, and that means that we have to look in the organization. That is where the problem is. And there is a phenomenon in systems. What is the phenomenon? What critical chain is based upon? In order to improve a system, in this particular case, the organization, you have to find the constraint. The only way to improve a system is by removing a constraint, and you don't need to know anything else than how to remove the constraint. Well, that means that from a theoretical standpoint of view, we can ignore projects. And that is what I did in my approach. So in my approach, in the way how I manage those pipelines, or there is no relation, there is no project schedules, there's no resource management involved. So that makes well, okay, we can only focus at project organizations and ignore everything on projects. That is the basic message of this. And I have to close the door because it makes noise in the background. Okay, good. And the paradigm shift, what I talked about, is that we have to create a continuous uninterrupted flow of work through the organization. So we have all those projects, and all those projects, they need to move through the organization in a continuous uninterrupted flow. And that was in the end what I did, and that seemed to work. And it has to do with replenishing project pipelines in time. Now, what I'm now going to do is to dive deeper in the workflows in project organizations. And again, I'm closing a door. I closed the wrong door, and it is making some noise. So, back again. Apologies. Okay. Now, so we talk about workflows, and how does it work? Just a description. I have some animation on that, and that works like this. So first, start with an artist impression. I am the artist. This is how I look at project organizations. It is one big mess, chaos. Everything is connected to everything. There are blind spots, stuff we don't know about the organization. Everybody has their own blind spot, and it makes it very difficult to communicate with each other. And people in project organizations complain a lot about poor communication. So I can imagine that it is difficult to understand each other. And those lines that we see moving through the organization, through this graph, are the projects that move from the left to the right from where they exist, for where they get started to where they get completed. That is the idea. Now, clean it a little bit up, and the projects move from person to person, and that is what this graph is showing. Projects move from one person to the other person. And from one person we know that must have the highest workload. And the workload is not distributed evenly. There is people with a lot of work, there's people with few work, and one person will have the highest workload. So that is the bottleneck, the constraint, whatever, how we want to call this person. I mark this person in red, and I know this person has a name, and that is called Marianne. Okay. Now, we know from critical chain, from theory of constraints, that if we know the constraint, we can forget about everything else. So that is what we do, ignore everything else. I don't need to pay attention to resources and who else are involved in the project in order to move on. Well, typically the projects, they pile up. So all those projects need to go through Marianne in this particular case. But this is the problem. If you do too many projects, then it piles up. It is a mess. People she starts multitasking, making errors, don't have the time. It's a bit of a mess. I just presented. What we would like to see is a continuous uninterrupted flow, something like that. So if we let this move, then the projects get started ahead of time, and they have time to move to Marianne, and then they are just in time, and that will create a continuous uninterrupted workflow. She is working at 100% of her capacity, and that is great. And now the other projects, they are, Marianne is not, this bottleneck is not addressing all projects, so there are a few other projects still there. And also for these projects, there is another bottleneck. Yeah. And this other bottleneck, also therefore, we can line up the project. We have to think about, keep in mind, all these projects, they share resources all across the place. So this is also happening, but we can ignore that. But that's the principle of theory of constraints. We can ignore everything except the constraint, so we can forget about it. And in this case, we do that, and we have now just two separate pipelines. And we want to have a continuous uninterrupted flow. But if we push in too many projects, then projects start to pile up and we lose some projects. That is what in the top line happens. And it is not efficient. And we see at the end that there's, well, less projects coming out. And at the bottom, we see that there are projects. Well, there's not sufficient projects to keep the resource busy. And that is also not efficient. And so instead, we want to have a continuous uninterrupted workflow to create, well, the maximum throughput. And that is something like this. If this is the capacity that they can handle, then this is what we want to go through. Yep. So that is the idea. We can have multiple pipelines in project organizations. Okay. Now, the way, so also mentioned that organizations are for the purpose of efficiency. You can do all those projects, set up your own organization for each project independently. That is theoretical possible, but it's much more efficient to do that in an organization. And I want also to understand how exactly is that mechanism in organizations that make that we can execute projects more efficient. I really want to understand how that works. So that's what we're going to do. And it starts with, okay, we need to know what is the bottleneck analysis. So we do a bottleneck analysis, and I show you very quickly how that works. Oh. So, and I hope you can see an Excel spreadsheet at the moment. Is that correct? Can I see yes? Okay, good. Well, the bottleneck analysis, so we have to identify where are the bottlenecks. And it works like this. What you see is a list of projects over here. What you see is a list of names over here. And in the body are the number of days effort. So 1 is 8 hours of effort, 4 is 32 hours of effort. So the number of days of effort that is required for every project per resource. I think this is very straightforward. And here on the top row, we see for how much, that is just a summation. Well, we see that Marianne, I have some formatting on that. Marianne has the highest workload, so she is the bottleneck. Yeah. So if I select her, these are all the projects for Marianne. And if I if I would put them in a project pipeline, it would work like this. So remove them from this list. And I want to see what is the remaining project. And I see that Tiziana is the second bottleneck. So and this is, I can repeat it a couple of times, but the idea is we can identify the bottleneck. Now, this is super straightforward. There are more factors, by the way, what to determine which bottleneck we should choose. That has to do with revenue and throughput and priority. So we can make a choice. Which value stream do we really want to optimize most? So in this case, I just look at the workload. And what you see over here is all the projects now for Marianne that need to pass Marianne. Well, if this is the list of all the projects for coming year, let's say so, or for the coming 2 years, I don't know for how much, then Marianne will be the last one to be completed with all the work, and she will be the bottleneck. Okay. It doesn't matter if we add some other projects to it. This is not just dependent for one project. If we do more of the same project, it will not change. So it will, the bottleneck will not change if we add one project more or less. It will not change in the middle of a project that we suddenly have a totally different bottleneck. We look at a big amount of work, a large number of projects, and the best way to optimize that is to optimize it for Marianne. Okay, so this is the part one. Now we see Marianne, all of this work, 283, and now let's see how that works. So we can make that calculation for each resource. How much work is there for every resource? And you can get such a graph like this. As the work is not distributed evenly, so we have people with high workload, we have people with low work, like Peng, and Marianne has the highest workload, 283. I rounded it to 250 in this particular case. Now, what we see is that in this case, the blue bar, the blue color, means these are the projects that Marianne is involved. And for Marianne, all her projects she is involved in. So that is for her a lot of work. But we see for everybody else, also for how much time they are involved in projects Marianne is involved in. So the workload for this project pipeline for Marianne is like this. This is, if we just focus on the projects for Marianne, this is the entire workload for Marianne. Yeah, and for the pipeline as such. But we also see it is a workload higher than 100%. We can measure the workload, we can calculate that. It's very handy to see whether there is overload, and in this particular case, it's way too much work. She cannot do everything in the time that is scheduled for those projects or in this time. So we have to reduce that. And the reason why we have to reduce that is because if she would do it just like this, if we would line up, then all those red part will fail. And that is not just for Marianne, but also for everybody, those projects will fail. So a project Marianne is working on and that fails also for Peng, of course. So this is all the waste that we get. This is just a calculation. Okay, good. So what we do if we, the first way of efficiency, creating efficiency, is to line up the project for Marianne, for one bottleneck. So by lining up the work for Marianne, we create a sequential flow through the bottleneck, and that makes the pipeline more efficient. That makes the utilization of Marianne more efficient. And this is one way organizations can make become more efficient than not doing it. If we don't have a project organization, we cannot utilize Marianne like this. One project after another, one project after another, one project after another. That is the most efficient way. And make sure that the next project arrives just in time. If we arrive way too early, way too many, then we overwhelm Marianne. That is not good, but just in time will create sufficient pressure to keep her going. But if we start projects too late, then the workload will drop, and that is also not good. That is not efficient. This is the most optimal way for one pipeline. Good. Now we look. We also see that for all the other resources, the workload is really not very good. That is, they're wasting their time. They're waiting most of their time. Some have nothing to do. So now we can start the second pipeline. We had those other pipelines as well, what we saw in this picture. And that is the second way of efficiency, making project organizations efficient. And it is by utilizing more pipelines. And in this case, we have Tiziana. We mentioned her already. We can fill up her work with other projects till she also reached that level of 100%. And that creates the blue contribution of work, and that makes a better utilization of work. And the same can we do for Elisa. She is a third bottleneck, and so we have a much better output of projects. And this is parallel flows. So parallel flows utilize non-bottleneck resources. So I look at Marianne, she is our bottleneck, and by if I want to utilize the non-bottleneck resources, I have just to add another pipeline. And sometimes that is possible. And many project organizations have several pipelines, they do it already. But you could also think about, if there's a lot of capacity available, what can we do with the remaining capacity as well? Okay, good. So the concept of project organizations, organizations bring projects together in project organizations because that is more efficient. And the way why organizations are efficient, can be efficient, is because they can line up the projects for bottlenecks, sequential flow, and they can do project pipelines in parallel or workflows in parallel for the parallel flow for optimizing the workload for non-bottlenecks. And this is the concept, this is the mechanism behind projects and behind the efficiency. And it's important because if we want to make projects more, organizations more efficient, then we have to maximize that. We have to understand how that works. Okay, good. So now I go back to the model again. So we have organizations for the efficiency. That is the system, but it appears that there are two other systems inside, between projects and the organization. And that is the system of pipelines. So if the sequential flows, these are just straightforward pipelines. And we have the parallel flows, and that is utilizing multiple bottlenecks. And the challenge for parallel pipelines is, yeah, they share resources. I talk like that as like they are separate pipelines, but they are they share resources. There are dependencies between them. They are very much interconnected, and we must find a way to, if you want to optimize it, also the non-bottleneck resources. We must take care that those pipelines are synchronized even when resources are shared between pipelines and between projects. Okay, good. Well, this is what Empower Your Project is doing. This is what I'm just looking back. What is it exactly that I'm doing with Empower Your Project, with the pipeline app? And it is this. I'm implementing this model, or I'm implementing mechanisms that work with this model. And that is this way. And okay, well, what is special about this is that for doing this, I don't need project schedules. I don't need resource management. And that makes that I can skip a lot of the tasks and measures for this. So this is Empower Your Project. Now let's formalize the strategy as well. So we have a strategy on the parallel workflows that starts with identifying sequential workflows. Where are my bottlenecks? That is what we do with the Excel spreadsheet. Where are the sequential workflows? How are we going to define that? And then, okay, create a continuous uninterrupted workflow. And that is what the second part. And then finally, yeah, in the end, pipelines may come and they may go. The workflows can come and go. If the technology changes, if people leave the organization, if we hire more people, if the market will change, if there is a new crisis that can have impact on the portfolio of projects, that can have a big impact on how projects move through the organization. Yeah, that can have impact, and that then new pipelines, new workflows might occur and might emerge, and old workflows might vanish, and we have to stay on top of that, of course. Yeah. But this is a very slow process. In a normal organization, it will not happen from one project to the other project. You will need multiple projects, quite a line of projects, to discover, hey, I think that my project pipeline is running empty. What is the reason for it? And then it might be whatever reason could be there. Maybe sales is not doing a good job, but maybe also there is really a change. So project organizations are collections of emerging and vanishing project pipelines. Okay. So this is for parallel workflows, and this is for the sequential workflows. So if I have a sequential workflow, I must replenish the pipeline just in time. So I need to know when to start a project. Okay, that is one thing. And then if I replenish projects just in time, it is still a project. It's still a project organization with high levels of uncertainty. Things will change, and there will be deviations from what our ideal schedule is and what our expectation was. So we have to identify those disturbances so we can still do something about it before problems occur. So we have a signaling mechanism in for alerts, for alarms, for disturbances, for irregularities, for deviations. So we can do something about it to prevent that workflow will be discontinued, will be interrupted, or to prevent that a possible disruption will take on for too long time. So that we need to know. And finally, if we determine those disturbances, we can make a list of it and find the root cause based on our analysis later on. And this is the process of ongoing improvement. And this is the high-level strategy. The question is, of course, how to do that. Well, okay, that is with Empower Your Project, with the pipeline app. This is just an algorithm. Critical chain S&T tree doesn't describe algorithm. So this is under the, let's say, level of the S&T tree. But this is these kind of overviews, these kind of steps, we can use that in the S&T tree for an alternative approach. Okay, now. Okay. Now, what I've done right now is wait a minute. I'm moving back to the wrong slide. Yeah, I've created a new hypothesis. So the hypothesis is project organizations consist of different layers of systems. There is a hypothesis about how the strategy, how do we call that? How efficiency works, about flows, the parallel flow, the sequential flow. I've implemented this and it seems to work in practice as well. So this is the way how I look at project organizations. And now I'm going to compare that model with critical chain. So wait a minute, this is the wrong slide. I'm moving. Oh yeah, first I like to check with critical chain. Now we have much more background information. First to check how can it that critical chain is successful. So that is what I want to do. That is this one. How could critical chain be successful? So this was the theory of critical chain, and we see in the overview that there are measures doing this efficiency thing that is hidden in its staggering. So it is doing something. And also reducing the workload, and it is sufficient to create those success stories. So that is still, I still do understand why critical chain is so successful. It is in there. Yeah, we get those success stories. I still want to understand it, why that's possible. Then now is the question: why does critical chain fail, and why is nobody using it? And it has to do with those difficulties. It fails and administrator whatever. And now we come back to the hypothesis of critical chain. So I'm going to compare critical chain with this model. And the first observation is that critical chain doesn't document, at least not in the system and tactics tree, what I read, the concept of sequential and parallel flows. It is just not described. It's not described that you have to separate them, and I'm using my own words as sequential and parallel flows, but the concept that you have to utilize the bottleneck and utilize the non-bottlenecks, I miss that concept. There is a part about staggering. You have to do that in the, let's say, in the integration stage, and you have to think about the way how critical chain S&T tree describes it, is that you have a square in the middle of the city, a lot of traffic, and in the middle there is one traffic light. And when the square is too much loaded, or when there are too many people on it, the traffic light goes on red. And then people will get out of that square, they pass the square, and then the amount of people and traffic goes down. And when it is low enough, the traffic light goes on red again. And then for all those workflows, for all those traffic flows, they go to green, they are controlled with one measure. And that is how critical chain S&T is describing it. There's one measure, the integration stage, that is controlling this. And I'm missing this part. Maybe I'm not looking at it, maybe I just couldn't read it, but I'm missing that part. Another thing is that I don't see mentioned the concept of project organization, the part of the project organization dedicated for executing projects efficiently. And I think that is also important compared to the measures that are coming. The way how critical chain S&T describes project, the purpose of project is for executing project successfully and for rapid completion. And I think this is not correct. The rapid completion is not the goal of project. The purpose of project is to complete project successfully. And of course, we want that project get completed rapidly, but that is not the goal. Goal is get the project completed successfully. That rapidly causes measures and interactions and measures and whatever that don't contribute to completing projects successfully. The reason why projects fail and run into problems is people don't have the time. They have too many other things to do. That's the only thing that matters. Everything else we have to ignore. There's just one constraint, and it is related to whether people do have enough time to get their work done. And by adding another objective, completing projects rapidly, I see in critical chain, it takes the wrong focus. It takes the focus away from completing projects successfully. Despite all the other measures that are intended to increase that success, we miss the focus on making sure that people in the project level, just that we have people to get the work done. That's at least my interpretation of it, of critical chain. And okay, then for companies, the purpose is the reliability competitive edge. It is important to be reliable. And what I see in critical chain is measures to protect the end date. But without being able to execute projects efficiently, to me, that is not the right order. You first must be able to complete projects successfully. That is the purpose of projects. Then we must be able to complete projects efficiently. That is the second. And then we have to see what other competitive edge do we have to do. And by changing the order, I see that has impact on the way how critical chain is structured. Now, when I look at critical chain implementation, then the measures that actually are associated with controlling that workload are the green measures. And all the other measures are not related to controlling that workload. And I see algorithms depend on quality schedules, but for solving the problem of the workload for too many projects, there are way too much measures that are actually not related. And then we get the situation that people and project managers get the feeling that they have to carry the burden for problems they don't consider as their problem. They are not causing the problem. The quality of their project schedule is not the reason that the projects run into problems, while they need to put a ton of effort to fix that. And I think that is not correct. Now, well, this is my interpretation of critical chain. So now the reason, so the disablers, I think we have spot them quite precisely. In the model of how project organizations work, in the understanding by the creators, I miss a lot of the systems you must understand in order to control that flow. I just miss it. I don't see the recognition. I feel the intuition. There's remarks in the S&T tree that shows there is a feeling of how it works, but we have to be able to articulate very precisely how those systems work, how does mechanism work, and I miss that. And the result of that is that in order to get it working, there's way too complex a solution. And then when it is too complex, I do understand why organizations are not interested in it. Because when I come with a complex story to my clients, they are just not interested. They want just to have super simple solutions. And compared with Agile, that is a simple solution. They will understand immediately. But it happened to me that critical chain is just too complex to explain how it works and why it works. And it also shows, wait a minute, that we first have a ramp up in the first period, 2007, everything was new, but it takes a while for a strategy to establish and to recognize, but then it appears that it cannot sustain. If the strategy is not fixed, is not have alignment with how project organizations really work, it cannot sustain. That's exactly what we see. So, and this is my answer to why does critical chain fail? Basically, so all those enablers, but the ground reason for it is actually there is a lack of understanding of how project organizations work. And this understanding is what makes Empower Your Project. And why Empower Your Project? It has the capabilities of being the successor of critical chain. It is doing only one thing. At least what I present today, I just focus on the pipelines. There is more to tell, but we do this, that is for another moment. But it is the effective part of critical chain that is that is responsible for creating the resources is the staggering part. And this is where critical chain, where Empower Your Project is focusing upon. There's a new way with the app, we can do it, but the strategy is we must be able to manage project pipelines before we do anything else. Project managers manage projects, they are not the problems. People manage their work, they are not the problems. In project organizations, the problem is that the dynamics is too complex. Organizations don't know how to manage the flow, and that is where this is a new solution. Okay, good. What my goal is, I'm trying to sell this to clients, etc. But you are not the audience of clients for this. Maybe your clients might be interested in it. What my goal is to share this knowledge and build up a community to create that new tree on the new branch on the tree of critical chain of theory of constraints for project organizations. That is my goal. And I invite you to join the Empower Your Projects community. We have time for questions in a minute, but I'd like to share this. I invite you to join the Empower Your Projects community. There is replays of materials there. Can I show that? Yeah. I just show very quickly, it takes a minute. I show it over here. And this is on my phone. It is also available on the web. I go here to my program. There is replays of the bootcamp program. I go down, there is possibility to communicate and share ideas, topics. I think it is good to have a community where people can be active. There is replays of a bootcamp. This bootcamp over here is about how project pipelines work. That is 4 sessions, and there is a video program. It is a recorded it is a recorded version. 4 sessions go into the details of how project pipelines work, how to operate them, how to set them up, how to analyze where the bottlenecks are with cases. And there is a business bootcamp that is related to how to, actually sell pipelines to organizations. Critical chain is what I hear, a marketing problem, so I also look at it. There are replays for previous sessions like this, and I like to share this knowledge. I invite you to join where am I? To join this, it is, and support me, donate me for $29.50 per month. If you like, you're very much welcome. I like to share this knowledge and get more people, make it available to more people. I like to spend some time to questions. I saw questions passing by, and maybe someone wants to ask the question that that you put on the in the chat right now, and we can spend some time on that. We have 15 minutes left. Go ahead. Do you like it? Can I hear something?
Yeah, no, my question was, if staggering projects involves making sure that you get a most constrained resource at 100%, you need to know ahead of time how much work will be flowing to that person. But in uncertain projects, you know, it might be done in a half an hour, it might be done in 10 days. You just don't know how long a task is going to take potentially ahead of time until later. So how do you make sure that that person, you know ahead of time how much time is required for that person? Okay. So those numbers in that Excel sheet, you said was 248. How did you know that was that number?
How do I know this number?
Yeah, how did you come up with that number?
Okay, the question that I ask companies, organizations is fill out a spreadsheet and do go to your project manager and ask them to fill out the spreadsheet. Ballpark figures are okay. You can make approximations. Everything is okay. So the objective is for the bottleneck. That's finding who is the person with the highest workload. And this is just estimates. You can look it up in your project schedule, but if you don't have a project schedule, you can make an estimate. If I have a project that has a budget in 4 hours of 100,000 euros, I know how to spread the work. I can make a quick guess. I don't need the project schedule for that. If I have a project schedule, I just can look it up. So this is the base planning.
Yeah, so what does each of those numbers mean? Is it hours? Is it
this is working days. In this particular case.
Working days. Okay, so it's working days.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter so much how accurate it is. So we know that estimates are always inaccurate. In setting up a pipeline, speed is the most important thing. Most of the data will be thrown away anyway. And the earlier we get the data, the earlier we can show pipelines, we can show roadmaps, plan boards, identify where are the bottlenecks, where are the irregularities. And the earlier we can present that picture, the better it is. Hurry, 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 get the data, quick, quick, quick. We can fix it later also. The biggest risk is that organizations start to try to come up with a perfect analysis, and that is not necessary. There is a feedback loop in the algorithm, and that is that it measures the flow, the outflow of how fast projects are moving out, and that is used to compensate, to correct the inflow of projects, also to replenish that. So if work takes longer than anticipated, then okay, it just takes longer, then also the next project will be started a little bit later. So that was your question, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes, I guess so. So if you've got the amount of projects and you've ordered them in what you think is the best way to order it, and I was just thinking about how do you know each person's time to complete, then you can do this, but it's just sometimes you just don't know how long it's going to take potentially, like someone. Yeah.
Well, the truth is, so I need a couple of parameters. In total, I need 4 parameters per project to describe the interaction between the project and the pipeline. And it is not about how precise one project is moving, it is about how is the entire flow moving. And in this particular, in this workshop, I'm looking at the overall strategy at the level of the strategy and tactics. And what we're now asking is about the mechanisms of the pipeline itself. There's a bit out of scope, but it is all part of the bootcamp program that is part in the membership as well. You have access. People paid hundreds of euros for that, and you can now get it for the 29 euros.
I have a question, John.
Yes, go ahead.
So just staying on the same example, you have Marianne with all these estimated workloads for the projects, but how does your approach account for the complexity of the timing? Because those 7 hours, those 7 days, 2 days, 5 days, etc., are not scheduled at the same time. And we're trying to solve the problem of that resource not being overloaded and not being throttled out and have nothing to do all the time.
Okay.
And these hours or efforts are when? How do you account for that?
Let me see if I can quickly get a presentation that I look for. Is it this one? I think so. No. Where is it? Yeah, over here. Oh. Okay,
Don't forget to share. Don't forget to share your screen. Yeah.
I'm trying to share my screen. I'm also looking where is my buttons? Okay, over here. I'm trying to make the screen available, and it takes a few clicks. Yeah, and now I resume share. What you see is a project schedule, correct? You can see
yes.
You can see my
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You see here Marianne. She is working in 2 tasks. There are 4 parameters I need. So in the normal, so the 7 hours per project is the sum, what you see over here. So this together is 7 hours or 7 days or whatever. Then I ask always in this bottleneck analysis, what is the duration, the planned duration? And when I know the project, when I know what is the bottleneck, I can also ask for the lead time and the lag time. The lead time is the time it takes to prepare the work for the bottleneck, and the lag time is the time it takes from the bottleneck till the project is completed. Now, this is the 4 parameters. Then let me see if I also have that easily available. If we have what I also take, what we also need to take into account, we have a project like this, but it can be, we actually don't know. What we know is when the bottleneck will be available. That is part of the analysis. And now, good, yeah. But we don't know whether that will be earlier or later. That we don't have full control over when it exactly will be. There's uncertainty, so it can be available earlier or later. We have to take that into account in our analysis. And what we also see that uncertainty makes the project completely very vague. So that is also what is taken into account in replenishing the pipeline. In the end, it is all about one question: yes or no. Are we going to start the project today or not? And for just this one question, it feels that if you have to analyze all your dependencies, all your tasks, all your resource assignment, and when everybody is available, that feels a little bit out of balance. And in this, you can do that with just a few parameters as well. And even better, with it is sufficient to create a continuous flow to calculate what to do. Okay. This is just too short to explain the entire mechanism, of course, and I do realize that.
No, as long as you have some consideration for the timing of the efforts, I'm satisfied with the answer.
Yeah. The efforts, that's something every project manager will know. Every project manager will know what are these parameters. What are where are my, so every project manager will be able to give you this figure in 5 minutes, in 3 minutes. When I ask this, it takes less than 10 minutes per project in practice. This is just at their fingertips. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Louis. Was that answering your question? Okay, great. Do I have buffers in front of the bottleneck? And the answer is yes, Richard. There is when you start project ahead of time, and when there is a lot of uncertainty in it, you have to start a project even further ahead of time. And that means that likely the project will arrive too early. Well, that is a buffer. The time that it arrives too early will be a buffer for the project, so that when the bottleneck will be ready, it can always pick up a new task. And that is one of the measures that can be done, is to see whether that buffer is filled, yes or no, and if it is too low, raise a signal on that. Thank you very much. Yeah. It is also good to realize that this conflicts with the fever chart. You cannot do the fever chart and this kind of project pipeline, because this chain of the uninterrupted workflow cannot be combined with an uninterrupted critical chain. Okay. How sensitive is the sequential flow to change in estimate scope? Let me see. Lane, I have received your question, and I'm going to. Okay. What the app provides is a plan board, and the plan board shows where projects are relative in the pipeline relative to the bottleneck, and the bottleneck is in the in column. So when a project is worked on by the bottleneck resource, it is in the in column. Now you can imagine that, and you have to move projects manually across the board. This is just a straightforward plan board, Kanban, Scrum, whatever, but then on the project level. And you can imagine that how projects move tells something about the velocity of the projects in the pipeline. And it tells both the average velocity as well as the level of fluctuations. Now, the question is, how sensitive is the sequential flow to changes in project estimate scopes, new projects, canceled projects? This adds up all to the uncertainty in the pipeline, and that it's measured. And then some straightforward statistics apply to that, where you can provide probabilities for how certain do you want to have it, do you want to have your outcomes, and that will impact how long in advance project will be started. When the levels of uncertainty is high and you want to have a high probability, 90%, 95%, you have to start the projects away a lot of in advance, which is very expensive. That will definitely have impact on the throughput of the pipeline, because people will be pulled away because to work on those projects. So you have to, but I use a rule of thumb, 70% reliability is good enough. Okay, Lane. How does the algorithm signal the need for specific projects to be paused, delayed, or stopped? Okay. Let me see. Okay. The project provides a plan board, and the plan board shows what is the date that the project must be released, must be started, and based on all the information available, when is it likely that the project will be completed? This takes into account levels of uncertainty, fluctuations, etc. Okay. In that part, we can see that is hidden, it's not shown, but there is also when will the bottleneck, when will the work, must the work be available for the bottleneck? And you can measure that, in the plan board, and when its projects are not making enough progress, then it just shows, it gives a signal, it gives a message. It just gives an alert. Let me check if I have that available. Something like this. So here I have a project Empower over here, and it says project has been started too early. So this is the question, this project must be passed. Yeah. And for this, you actually only need to keep the project in the pipeline, in the plan board, in the right column. People don't have to make any updates to the project, no status updates, no progress updates. People don't have to report anything except where is the project in the pipeline. This is only about the main flow of all the projects. It is just looking at all the cars on the highway and to determine what is the flow on the highway, and then you can make a prediction when projects will be where. And this is making that prediction and whether projects are deviating from that prediction. Okay. Okay, I go how sensitive. Yeah, Gideon, I've answered that question. Fluid dynamics insights help me. Yeah, there is fluid dynamics in it. What is a trouble with pipelines? So if you don't understand, if organizations don't understand the concept of pipelines, then as long as there is flow in the organization, the pressure is low. And that is also in fluid dynamics, Louis. When there is flow, the pressure is reduced. I don't know whether it's the same concept, but it seems to work. And the moment that projects start to slow down or get stuck, the flow disappears and suddenly the pressure increases, and then everything blocks and stucks, and then it becomes a total mess. So when projects are running, people are moving, projects are moving, people have time to pick it up, organizations will experience a low workload, low pressure, and they will continue, if they have sufficient projects, to continue to add more and more projects. But the moment it stucks, then suddenly there are way too many projects in the pipeline, and then everything stucks. This is the analogy that I have with the fluid dynamics. I don't know whether the mathematics of this is exactly the same, but this is an observation, and I like the analogy or the metaphor for that. Okay. The big insight from him, that is a question from Seraphim, is that the main thing that matters is flow. Yeah. Now the interesting part, so this is also in theory of constraints, also in the system and tactics tree, is the phrase that the number one consideration is flow. However, critical chain is a workload-oriented algorithm mechanism. It is not flow-oriented. Whatever people say, it is about workload. And the continuous uninterrupted flow, then we talk about flow, is not part of the algorithm. That is the paradigm shift that I made during that family holiday. It's all about workload, counting projects in a specific stage. And that has its limitations. And I'm sure you can make approximations with advanced software and do it. But my experience was it didn't work for me. And that is the way how I came up, figured out a different way on a different paradigm, which is flow oriented. It is absolutely important to create that flow. And flow is an easy thing to recognize in an organization. Workload not, flow well. Good, thank you very much. Okay, let me see. Good. If there are no more questions, then we can wrap up. What is the definition of efficiency for a project pipeline? This is where I come from. Organizations bring their project management activities together for the purpose of efficiency. I have a feeling what they mean with it. And this is about how to get more output from the same team of resources. The pipeline, the sequential flow, and the parallel flow are mechanics to fulfill that efficiency need. Is a pipeline efficient? A pipeline, the purpose of a pipeline is to create that efficiency. How to measure that? I don't know. There is a possibility. So what I typically do in, if I have do I have a graph of that? Over here, what the way how I measure efficiency or progress is I hardly can't see it, but it is taking a baseline. So look at how efficient was the organization, what was the performance of the organization last year. I also use that to calibrate the pipeline, by the way, and then compare the current productivity after implementing the pipeline and see whether the output goes up. And then if it goes up, it is apparently more efficient. I have no definition of efficiency. It is the concept, getting more out of the organization, more output, more productivity. I hope that is sufficient at the moment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good. I try to do a session like this every month, so I hope to see you again. And consider joining the network, the Empower Your Projects network. It just helps me also to be in touch, and I'm looking for a way how to share this knowledge and to explain stuff about this. Good. Good. The big insight from him. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Could factoring in the contribution to throughput of each task in the pipeline have an influence on project scheduling? Could factoring in wait a minute. This is the link for the session for the.
No. Link for Empower Your Projects. Can you just put in the chat, please?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Could factoring in contribution to throughput? This is a complicated question for me. Can you explain that? That's from Rowan, isn't it?
Hi, Jan. Yes. Just when we were going through your initial example with the various estimates for tasks and the loading on finding the bottleneck, That's the one. You mentioned that in some cases you might want to factor in additional things other than just the task length when you're looking at prioritizing certain projects. So I thought about perhaps if you think about certain tasks being more valuable in terms of throughput to the project organization, if adding a weighting factor there would somehow change where the bottleneck arises. For example, instead of having just a number of days of loading, you might consider the idea of a number of days of loading, if you have that kind of throughput idea involved as well, because it might move where your bottleneck is.
Well, that could be done. There is, I show here a very simple, I'm pointing at that. There's my big screen. I now just look at, in this overview, I just look at workload. But the project has also a commercial value. And those projects might also have a strategic value. And it is good to also to have an understanding and a priority and whatsoever. So this is additional information I ask for those projects to see whether just looking at the workload is good enough. For example, if there is R&D involved, if projects do operational commercial projects and R&D projects, then the R&D projects might put the balance totally wrong, because those chief technical officers, they are so crazy creative and have all those big plans, and they come with 1001 projects they want to have done, and that suggests that those R&D projects are giving way too much pressure on the organization. Well, everybody knows we are never going to do those projects. So the commercial value is important, the strategic value, and then it is just a cross-check that if we choose Marianne in this case, are then also the top priority projects in her pipeline. If not the top priority project, if not the very expensive or very valuable projects are in her pipeline, then consider maybe a lower loaded person to be the bottleneck, because executives will constantly overrule the priority. So it must be the top priority pipeline must also have the top priority projects. Pipelines will always overrule the priority of the project, but that goes wrong if the pipeline only contains low priority projects. So that makes sense. That makes the analysis a bit more complicated, but when this is the start and with 2 or 3 additional columns, it can be easily done. It's just an Excel spreadsheet night, and then you have the data. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Okay, then it is time. I hope it is a little bit cooler for you, Rowan, than the 30 degrees it was earlier today. And I don't know how the weather is in Canada at the moment. And Gideon, you're from Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's 17 at the moment.
17 at the moment.
It's been raining quite a bit in Australia.
Okay, well, we get snow tomorrow, so that is
okay.
It is not supposed to snow, but that is going to happen. So snow and sunny. Okay, good. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it very much. You were here. Wish you good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.